Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water with those making waves. My name's Todd Bottler, your host, and today is a special Talk+Water. It's the first Talk+Water where we're finally going to be out in the field talking about the resources as we are, looking at them. And it's something I wanted to do for quite a while. And finally here, October 28th, 2021, we're doing it. And I'm out in Schlacker County. Did I say that right?
Menard County.
I'm in Menard County? Okay. I got close. So I'm in Menard County, and I'm overlooking the San Saba River. And I'm with my special guest, Kyle Garmany, who is a hydrologist with the Nature Conservancy. Kyle, how you doing?
Doing well, Todd. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be talking about the Nature Conservancy and some of its activities here in Texas with regard to water, with a focus more or less on the San Saba River today. And just for those of you who are not familiar with the San Saba or Menard County, we're about 3 hours west of Austin. And today is a beautiful, cool, breezy day. There's literally not a single cloud in the sky. I don't know. Somehow I accidentally timed this very well because I was like trying to avoid coming out here when it was hot. And it looks like we've done that. So Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, first of all? Start there.
Sure. Well, I grew up here in Texas. I spent my summers as a kid in between playing on the Blanco River and fishing in Trinity Bay and Galveston Bay. That was probably where I first really fell in love with nature and the outdoors, and found a real appreciation for the waters around me. I left Texas, moved to Northern California to go to school, where I studied environmental engineering and water resources. I came back in around 2009 with a degree in hydrology, and I came back and started working for the state as a hydrologist, and was there for several years before coming here to the Nature Conservancy.
So what I really was impressed with when I looked at your background, among other things, is that you worked for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and also I guess the Texas Water Development Board for a little while. And so if you're familiar with water management in Texas, those are really the three statewide agencies that are involved with water day in and day out. And so, that's a unique background to have, that kind of familiarity with all three of those.
Yeah, I bounced around a little bit for sure. When I came back to Texas, as I said, I started working for the Texas TCQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I worked there working specifically on water rights issues. And at the time when I came back, 2010, 2011, we were having the worst one-year drought on record. So it was a really interesting time to be working for that agency on water resource issues. And there was a real high demand for practitioners working on water. I spent a short period of time at the Water Development Board working on hydrographic surveying, where I was really focused on, the research and development of data to help municipalities understand how quickly they would be running out of water. So we were surveying lakes and reservoirs to try to determine exactly how much water was left there in those reservoirs. And then I left from there back to TCQ for a while, working as a hydrologist on water availability modeling, really working through the technical aspects of the models that we use to allocate and manage water resources in the state. And then for several years at Texas Parks and Wildlife, where I was able to work on environmental flows, science, and policy and really where I developed the sort of skill set that allowed me to understand how to apply both science and policy to inform better management of our rivers, including the development of the strategies that I'm working on now, which are market-based strategies to influence river management and restore and protect rivers.
Okay, great. And, I have to make sure that I ask you this question, because I ask everybody this question. How did you first get involved with water, or what, decide that's what I want to be working on for the rest of my life?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, I grew up as a kid, playing on the rivers in the hill country and spent a lot of time fishing on the coast. And, I knew at that time that I wanted to do something working outdoors. I just really felt a desire to be a good steward of the environment, and felt there was an opportunity after I left high school to follow in that interest. And when I was in Arcata in Northern California at Humboldt State, there was a course that I took on fluvial geomorphology, like really understanding the way that rivers behave and change over time. And I felt that was really the focus of what I wanted to do, was work specifically on rivers and with a physical science sort of focus. And I think that's, I kind of followed that lead ever since. Although, now my work kind of bridges from both the science, application of science and research, to really working on strategy.
Gotcha. And so a little more about where we are right now. This is your family's home in Menard County, overlooking the San Saba River.
Yes. Yeah. We were fortunate enough in the past year, my grandparents and my parents moved from Houston out to San Angelo. And my grandparents were able to purchase this property overlooking the river. It's a nice location for me, because so much of my work happens in the Upper Colorado River Basin, working on the Llano and the San Saba. But it's also a nice, as you said, it's a few hours outside of Austin, and it's only an hour away from San Angelo, where my folks live.
Well, it's a beautiful sight here on a great fall day. You can hear the wind chimes here on the porch, and also me kicking the tennis ball to your dog, who's running through the leaves and up and down this hill, and he's not tired yet. He's staring at that ball, waiting for us to kick it again. So tell us something about the Nature Conservancy of Texas and its interest in water.
Well, TNC is a conservation organization that's mission is to protect the land and waters on which all life depends. We've been around for over 65 years and working in 75 countries globally. Our work really focuses on land, freshwater, ocean, and climate, and climate mitigation, climate change mitigation work. In TNC, Texas, since 1964, has conserved nearly 1 million acres of land and protected over 200 miles of rivers and streams throughout the state. It's that commitment and focus to water conservation that has allowed me to do the work that I'm doing now, and really feel that it's a great opportunity for TNC Texas and an emerging field of this water transactions that we're working on to restore and protect rivers around the state of Texas.
And about that, I guess more specifically, the San Saba River is not really the only river that you've got some transactions going on.
Yeah, that's right. Over the past 5 years, we've developed transactions in the Trinity Basin, in along and around Galveston Bay. We have worked on the Guadalupe. We've worked in the Upper Colorado on the Llano and the San Saba. some work that's still developing on the Pedernales River. The upper Trinity is an area of focus. And yeah, we continue to look for opportunities across the state. We do quite a bit of work to evaluate areas where hydrologic alteration or reductions in stream flow are occurring to really prioritize where we put our resources. But we're excited that, in the past 5 years, we've transacted, over 200,000 acre feet of water across those basins and really looking forward to more.
And so are most of those transactions for terms, a specific number of years, or are some of them permanent?
Yeah, it's really dependent on, the transaction strategy, which is to say we evaluate what the conservation priority is with any transaction. And then we work with the seller to determine what their goals are and really try to find an opportunity where those things converge. For example, the majority of transactions that we've done in the Upper Colorado, including the San Saba and the Llano, have really focused on putting water back in stream when it's needed most in summer periods. So some of those agreements have been what we call dry year lease arrangements. So we have a term of, say, 5 years, and the agreement allows us to call on that water, request forbearance of the diversion of that water in a single year. But we've also executed, longer term agreements where, a water user may be utilizing 500 acre feet of water, and we've been able to reduce their overall, water allotment over a 5-year term by half or a portion, so that we're ensured that over that 5-year term that, that water will stay in stream throughout the year. Yeah.
Gotcha. So thinking about your dry year option agreements, do you usually base those on like a certain, flow level at the point where the permit's located? Or do you just have an arrangement where you say, well, look, when, we'll contact you before we need you to forbear, based on some other condition?
Yeah, it really depends, on the agreements that are run of river, which is to say, there's a diversion point along the river and the irrigator or user has the ability to divert. We often try to look at the nearest stream gauge to look at when conditions on the river are getting to a point where we want to ensure that water stays in stream. All of these things are negotiated and determined within contract. We also have agreements in place where it's a reservoir operator. And so it's based on, flow conditions downstream of the reservoir where we're requesting releases from the reservoir to increase flows in those systems. So, for those forbearance agreements or agreements that trigger some release of water, it's always dependent on conditions within the river. But, where we're monitoring could be the location of the diversion point, or it could be a gauge, a USGS gauge upstream or downstream of that location.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the San Saba River. Can you, describe it generally, I guess, for our listeners?
Yeah, the San Saba is one of the last free-flowing rivers in central Texas. It's a spring-fed stream on the western extent of the Texas Hill Country. The river rises in eastern Schleicher County, and it picks up most of its flow around Fort McCavitt, where there's a spring complex that provides flow there, and a few others on the way down. But generally, it flows from that primary spring at Fort McCavitt about 150 miles to its confluence with the Colorado.
And I know that there have been some issues out here in terms of surface water being diverted by shallow groundwater wells and things like that in the past. And, I'm just curious if there's anything you can tell us about that.
Yeah, there's certainly been conflict as it relates to scarcity in this river in recent years, especially during the drought period. There are sections of the river that have gone dry in recent droughts. There's Fish and Wildlife Service has recently proposed listing of several mussel species here. So the water scarcity that's driven conflicts on the San Saba is, it's one of those places where you can see that playing out. TNC's role over the past 5 years has been to inform a better just understanding of the groundwater surface water interaction, and we've done that by collecting data, both through gain loss measurements, through long-term monitoring stations of surface water, as well as groundwater wells, so that the conversations that are happening, the conflict that's occurring, and the discussions and management decisions that are being made can be informed by real data, by science. And so we see our role at this point to provide that information, to inform water management and discussions that are happening around, what the contributions to, the water scarcity issues are, but also to provide solutions where we are working, as I said, on the development of things like water transactions to put water back in stream when it's needed most.
And the San Saba, I'm sure it's fully appropriated, if not probably really over appropriated. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, what that means, so that everybody understands that?
Yeah. So, in Texas, we have a water rights system that's based on prior appropriation, which is just a doctrine that provides water rights in a sort of system of priority where the oldest water rights are the most senior and the junior the most junior. What sort of fully appropriated would mean is that all of the water is allocated through those water rights so that there's no more water in the system than can be diverted. It's likely that this system is over allocated. It's certainly in some, or many years it is so. That's what that means just in terms of the allocations of water through water rights. But this is not the only river that sees scarcity and is likely, fully or over allocated in Texas. So we see these water scarcity issues happening across the state where, in drought years or in dry periods, sections of the river run dry. And that has real impacts, as discussed, there are on this river, there are mussel species that are under proposed listings. But across Texas, we have seen declines in freshwater biodiversity. I mean, roughly 50% of all of our Texas native fishes are now gone. So it's finding opportunities to work within that water rights system that, having market incentives for water users to change their behavior that we feel is one opportunity to, move the needle on conservation and freshwater protection and restoration.
So to make a shameless plug for something else that I do in Texas Plus Water, recently, actually the last issue in September, there's an interview there with the point person for the Center for Biological Diversity on these mussel listing proposals for Texas, the 6 central Texas mussels. And as you said, some of them are here, I suppose. And, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, having worked for a couple of decades on the Guadalupe River where, there are endangered species in the springs and the endangered whooping crane down at the end of the river, how that will impact, the way that people use this river and other rivers where, the mussel listings are approved.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I also see this as an opportunity. Any federal listing comes with, the potential for conservation agreements and funding through the federal government. I think that the sort of flow restoration and protection work that we're doing here is essential to providing future protection for those species, and it also, agreements that that work for the landowners as well. I think the transactions that we've developed here, they not only provide protection for the river and habitat for those species as well as other wildlife, but they also provide drought resilience and protection for producers. For a water user like an irrigator along the river, times of drought occur and they already impact their operations. Having the ability to enter into agreement that contemplates, future dry periods and allows us to offset foregone profit from that producer and provide them for the ability to build in drought resilience, both, economically within their operations. I think it's a win-win, both for, users of the river as well as for, the environment.
So, thinking about the San Saba and the transactions that you've got going here on this river, tell us a little bit about some of those transactions and how that developed. One of the things I'm curious about is, did you go around and talk to water right holders, or was there something that was maybe in the local newspaper and then people contacted you? How did you make those connections and sit down and work out those agreements?
Yeah, environmental water transactions are voluntary trades between willing, sellers and buyers, and they focus on that change of behavior around water use to provide benefit to the environment. Our initial efforts to engage with landowners across Texas have really been, as I mentioned earlier, evaluating through statistical analysis, desktop hydrology, and geospatial analysis of sort of priority conservation areas where those impacts of scarcity are occurring, and then where we think we can move the needle through transactions. Our partners at Texas Parks and Wildlife, we worked with them to develop an environmental flows information toolkit, a dashboard that can be used to answer some of those questions. So we started there with the science to really, ask the question, where should we be working? The answer, one of those locations is here on the San Saba. There are some others on the Llano, and those other locations that I mentioned before that we're working. The outreach that occurs after you determine where to work is really ideally through our partners. We love to work with organizations that already have a foothold in those communities that we can use as a conduit to get the information and start those conversations around what an agreement can look like. So we've worked on the Llano with the Llano Watershed Alliance. We have worked with Galveston Bay Foundation. We've worked with Audubon. We've worked with other partners like Texas Water Trade to help facilitate conversations to find those opportunities and start those conversations. But ultimately, it comes down to, direct engagement. I've found that in those cases where we didn't know anyone and we tried to cold call through, say, a letter, do some outreach like that we had pretty limited success. And, I think that's understandable. These are, long-held private property rights. And so, your ability to engage and discuss any sort of, change of behavior or transaction is best to come from a face-to-face conversation.
So I'm curious, has the river authorities been, interested in working with you all on this? Because I've got a background working at a river authority and spent a lot of time trying to get people interested in environmental water rights and transactions related to that. I'm just curious, in what you've been doing, have they been receptive or helpful?
Yeah, most definitely. The the larger river authorities in the state, including LCRA and GBRA, we continue to stay in close contact with them and discuss overlapping priorities. I think that there's a mutual interest in our developments of these, transactions to help support the shared conservation goals that we have. So I think they're supportive. We certainly lead our work again based on the science and our conservation priorities. But the conversations that we've had and the communications with those organizations have been nothing but, supportive. There are smaller, river authorities or surface water management districts like the Menard County Irrigation Water District here that manages the county's surface water rights. And they have also been, really engaged and supportive of the work that we're doing. We've also been able to, where it makes sense with those sort of what I would call institutional water right holders, help them to gain access to funding to execute agreements or to improve irrigation infrastructure, where through our engagement and work with them, their ability to improve that infrastructure results in some conserved water, and that conserved water is then dedicated to the environment. So it's just another way that we've been able to develop these environmental water transactions and implement them with institutional water right holders.
Tell everybody your dog's name.
This is Fickle.
Fickle is like, he doesn't want to let go of this ball, but he wants me to throw it at the same time. So,
she'll go all day.
So, and just to fill in the gap there, LCRA is Lower Colorado River Authority and GBRA is Guadalupe Blanco River Authority.
That's right.
And when you talk about water markets and the kind of things that you're doing here, there's water markets and there's water markets, I guess. I mean, you've got the Edwards Aquifer Authority, which is really a formal water market with
right.
regulatory system set up to manage. And, this is a little bit different. And so, I'm just kind of curious, I'm thinking that, what you're doing here demonstrates that it's not always necessary to have a formal system set up, probably be helpful, but you can achieve goals related to water right transactions for the environment, maybe in the absence of those.
Yeah, I think there are a number of enabling conditions for water markets. And I believe that, across the state of Texas, they're there, right? I mean, we have clear entitlements through water rights. We have the ability to trade those among willing sellers and buyers. The one that I think people are most skeptical of in Texas is that we don't have closed basins and we don't have a cap. But the reality is that through Senate Bill 3, we now have a limitation on new water right allocations, right? I mean, there are clear limitations to being able to go in and get a new surface water right in pretty much most of the basins in Texas. And so I would argue that provides a functional limit on your ability to receive that. And so we do have a cap. And so while basins aren't officially closed in Texas, I mean, there are limitations to receiving a new water right and allocation in Texas. And so I think those primary enabling conditions for water markets exist. I think the limited market activity that we've seen is really just due to a lack of facilitation for those trades to occur. There are plenty of transactions that are occurring between, irrigator to irrigator or a municipality purchasing irrigation rights. The new, sort of nascent part of, I would say, this work that we're doing in this strategy is that we're now, as the environmental community, entering into this space and representing, the river itself and engaging in transactions which all require a formal regulatory change in the beneficial use of those water rights, we add in-stream use to those rights so that we can legally protect that water in stream when is necessary for the river.
So, you hit on some interesting things there. There's, a lot of discussion right now about Senate Bill 3 and whether it has been successful or not in, addressing environmental flow needs. And I know that, having been there when all this was happening in 2000, I think it was 2007 when that bill was passed. There was a thought that there would be more of these transactions, I guess, that would have happened sooner. And it seems like they now are starting to, get a little momentum, which, it would have been nice if they'd gotten more momentum closer to 2007. But it does seem like now that there is more progress that had been occurring over the last 10 or 15 years in that area.
Yeah, I think, these were one of the defined voluntary strategies to meet, those environmental flow needs for the state. And I do think that we're beginning to gain traction, certainly from, the work that I have seen in the past 5 years in growing this program. Also other, new organizations that conservation organizations that are kind of entering into this space and starting to get engaged. I mentioned Texas Water Trade, Galveston Bay Foundation, Audubon. We've had support from Texas Parks and Wildlife, both with the science to support the transactions, as well as to potentially partnering on some funding to get this work done. So yeah, I think while it's been a slow start, the groundwork has been laid. It was laid before I, arrived and started working on these strategies. I think one of the catalysts, honestly, for the work is the scarcity, the challenge of scarcity that we're facing. And as our population grows, and the conflicts over water and the demands for fresh, clean water continue to outpace the supplies, then there will have to be a tool like, the water market or the environmental water transaction to help, meet those demands and those different interests within, the water user groups.
So you mentioned Texas Water Trade, and if listeners are really interested in the project they have going out, I guess is it north here or northwest of here, Comanche Springs?
Yeah, it'd be west of here.
West of here. There's a previous podcast episode on that project at Comanche Springs. So one thing that, I'm curious about, I think that, the generational change in leadership, many water institutions, particularly river authorities, that you've seen going on the last 5 to 10 years, maybe creates an opportunity for more projects like this. And the idea was really new to the kind of previous cadre of folks who were leading river authorities, and many of them were not too sure about it, and now the idea's been around quite a while, and you have a younger group who's kind of taking the reins now, and I just kind of wonder if you see that there's more general acceptance of the concept or practice.
Yeah, I mean, that's, there's reluctance to change or try new strategies, I think, regardless of, what you're working on. And in this space, as I said, I think we have the enabling conditions, the groundwork has been laid, the work is starting to gain steam. I mean, we've, grown in the past 5 years. As I said, we're up to, over 200,000 acre feet, transacted and protected in in-stream flow. And I do think that there's a shift occurring. And I don't know how much of that is due to generational change or more just the clear need to address the challenge of water scarcity and, the overall limited number of strategies that we have to do that.
So all the projects that the Nature Conservancy has around Texas related to these water transactions, are you involved with the transactions in other places, or are you just focused here on the San Saba?
Yeah, I work statewide, and so I lead our water transactions work. I mean, my official title is Water and Agriculture Program Director, but these transactions are just one of the strategies that we use to address water scarcity. TNC is working to work with our partners to protect and restore water resources around the state. We through land protection. And stewardship, we work to protect iconic Texas places, rivers and springs, places like the Devil's River and Independence Creek, or as you mentioned, the Edwards Aquifer. We're also fostering local, state, and federal policy improvements, including the work that we're doing with local governments on groundwater protection, informing the science needs to better manage those systems. We're also, influencing the way that the reservoirs and dam operations are being done. We are restoring, river flows, including on Caddo Lake with our reservoir reoperations project in that system. And then we're using these financial incentives, like as we talked about the environmental water transactions, things like water funds, and as I said before, incentivizing agriculture producers to change the way that they're managing through irrigation efficiency, the use of cover crops or other technologies that promote water conservation. Anything that we can do to move the needle on the protection and restoration of rivers in Texas. It's such an essential component of the work that we're doing at TNC. Water is really it connects so much of what we're doing. It's about human health. It's about the economy. It's nature. So we really feel like our work to address water scarcity is really one of the primary challenges, and you can't solve other environmental problems in Texas without addressing water.
And I guess really it's a testament to that the Nature Conservancy here in Texas is now led by the former general manager of San Antonio River Authority, Suzanne Scott, who I've known for a long time, and who brings this breadth of knowledge about and experience with water here in the state, and that's got to be a big benefit to the kinds of things that you're working on.
Absolutely. I'm so excited when Suzanne, came on. I mean, it was a clear commitment to freshwater in Texas by the Nature Conservancy. And we have just been, hit the ground running. I mean, her impact on the work that we're doing in freshwater in Texas was clear, from day one, just based on the relationships that she had and the knowledge that she has surrounding, freshwater issues and river management in the state. And we really look forward to, under Suzanne's leadership, expanding this program and the strategies that we're working on across Texas.
So coming back to the San Saba here, just tell us about a few of the specific transactions, what they look like.
Yeah, lease agreements are probably the most common, where we enter into a 5-year term with a landowner that requires, within that 5-year term, 1 or 2 year or 2 season forbearance, which is driven by flows on the river. When flows drop, we request that they quit irrigating. It might be halfway through the irrigation season and they discontinue that irrigation. We provide that water in river. But also, there are water users that have let's say a 500 acre foot allocation, and they're willing to reduce that allocation by some percentage, right? So we work with them to take that water, put it back in stream for a commitment of 5 or 10 years. We've also worked on irrigation efficiency projects that have a commitment of the conserved water to be put back in stream. So that could be, irrigation canal lining. It could be efficiency improvements. I just met with a producer yesterday to work with him. There's a new mobile drip irrigation system that's sort of being piloted down here. We're working to install some soil moisture meters to really help him understand how this new technology that he's using is getting soil to the depths that he wants within the soil profile, put water to those depths, and then he can make more informed decisions around when and how to irrigate. So all of those things, whether it's advancing the use of technology or supporting and incentivizing irrigation efficiency upgrades or direct lease agreements with irrigators, those are all what we consider environmental water transactions. And each of those deal structures, those transactions, are really based on how the water is being used, what the goals of the conservation goal is for the river, and what the producer, what their goals are for the water, and how they how we can engage with them to help them in shifting that behavior that has a conservation benefit.
When I think about what you're saying there, and I think about 42%, I think the US Geological Survey estimates that water use in the United States is going for agriculture, about 42%. In California, it's 80%. In Texas, it's 55, 50,
60%,
yeah, something like that. And so it seems like you're really dealing with the sector of water where there is really the most gains that can be made. I mean,
yeah, that's right. I mean, irrigators, or I should say agricultural, irrigation is the primary user of water. It's the primary use sector of water in Texas. And so by necessity, the majority of our agreements focus on working with agricultural, operators and irrigators. There's a lot of opportunity just to increase efficiency, to better manage these resources, but it has to be done thoughtfully. And the way that we work with those irrigators is to try and gain some commitment of the conserved water back to in-stream flow. So it's not just that an irrigator can increase his efficiency, because that may just result in more water being used for additional crop. What we try to focus on is incentivizing through payments or the purchase of equipment on shifting behavior around water use, but also committing that water where it's applicable to in-stream environmental flow.
You certainly see, at least with regard to the Edwards Aquifer, that there are a lot of irrigators who, they're growing crops and they're getting revenue off of that, but they're also at the same time, leasing water rights, and that's another kind of source of income for them, and significant income for many of them. And now there's a lot of discussion about that, and California is really being the way that they are going to reduce the amount of water that's being used there, and address some of the issues like groundwater subsidence. I mean, really, really serious over there. And, in many ways, some of the things that have been done here in Texas have really kind of, pioneered all that.
Yeah, I think, what we saw with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in California is really promoting the use of markets to facilitate, conservation of water that has a number of benefits. And I think that, the work that has been done in the Edwards Aquifer is held up as an example of how a functioning groundwater market can work to achieve those, defined goals. And so it is, one of the primary examples of a healthy functioning water market. I think that from a groundwater perspective, that is certainly difficult to do anywhere else in Texas outside of the Edwards. But we continue to try to advance, groundwater management, sustainable groundwater management, through working directly with groundwater conservation districts on, identifying opportunities to set, realistic goals that are based on, science and supported through data. As I said, we've been working here for the past 6 years to collect both groundwater and surface water information that can be used by local water managers. And we continue to work with other GCDs and groundwater managers across the state to do the same.
GCDs, groundwater conservation districts. Thinking about the Edwards and what you were saying, that market has now been functioning over 20 years. It's like, I'm trying to think, the permits were issued and I think they were finalized and finally, finished that work maybe in 2000 or 2001. And so here we are 20 years later. And I know that the amount of water that has been withdrawn from the Edwards Aquifer in any one year since the market has been functioning has never reached the level of pumping that occurred prior to regulation. And I think it was in 89 was the peak pumping year. And aquifer pumping has been, I think that was, about 542,000 acre feet of pumping in that 1 year. And I think for the most part, pumping has generally been about 100,000 acre feet less than that annually. I don't think it's ever gotten, anywhere near that previous record. And so, that's just, kind of one example how that market has reduced overall pumping and at the same time, been able to supply much of the need in that region. So just a little commentary there from me. So let's start thinking about what our listeners can do to make a difference with regard to environmental water needs. What would you suggest there?
Yeah, I think the best thing that we can do as water users is to just be more informed. The knowledge and understanding allows us to all make better decisions related to our water use and stewardship of rivers and our freshwater resources. To that end, folks should check out TNC's Texas Water Explorer. It's an online dashboard that allows you to view just a ton of information related to freshwater at a state level as well as locally. And you can view reaches where hydrologic alteration and scarcity are occurring. You can look at biodiversity issues, water quality. It's just a great resource for gaining a better understanding of what's happening in Texas related to water.
And so you kind of like anticipated there my last question, which is usually, how can people learn more about the Nature Conservancy of Texas? What's the web address for that?
Yeah, nature.org. If you want to check us out at TNC. Also, we've got, Twitter feed and we're on Facebook. And yeah, we're constantly posting great success stories of conservation around Texas from our partners and the work that we're doing. And so go online, check us out. There's always something interesting to read.
And I'll try to put the hyperlink to the water dashboard in the description of the podcast episode.
That'd be great.
So, Kyle, what's ahead for the Nature Conservancy of Texas?
Well, we're continuing to advance our freshwater protection strategies statewide. So while we've completed transactions for more than 200,000 acre feet to date, we're going to continue to work toward more agreements with landowners and partners for long-term protection. We're going to continue to advance stewardship of our iconic river landscapes and work towards reservoir reoperation agreements that improve river flows. We're also going to continue to advance the science that will inform better policy and freshwater management. Ultimately, I just want a future where my son and future generations of Texans can continue to enjoy these important freshwater systems. And we're going to keep pushing forward on conservation efforts to make that happen.
Well, I think that's great. I think there's a tendency for people to think that they can't really make a difference, but, working individually or collectively, people can make a difference with regard to water. And some of the things that you all have done are examples of that for certain. Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
It's been wonderful to finally get out in the field and record one of these episodes. And, just sitting here overlooking the San Sab on what is a fantastic day has just really been a lot of fun. This has been Talk+Water. My guest today was Kyle Garmany, the Water and Agriculture Program Director for the Nature Conservancy and their Texas office. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in and to say that if you enjoyed this episode of Talk+Water, please consider giving it a like. My name is Todd Butler. Let's talk water again soon.